All right, getting back in here on Diamond Conversations. Feels like we've been away for a long time as the world has changed since we last left you. But one thing that hasn't changed is the topic of baseball, the topic at hand today. Going to be going back down the baseball card route, which is never, ever a bad thing to do, as I am joined today by a wonderful author, an author of a book that I've been waiting for months and months and months, and I'm glad to see it's finally arrived as we welcome in Brad Balukjian, and we're going to be talking about the Wax Pack. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, like I said, I've been waiting for it because when I first started the show and I started to kind of make my way through the University of Nebraska Press, they sent me their website, and your book stood out like a sore thumb, and I waited for the month of April to arrive, and it's now here. And how's everything going for you first out there on the West Coast?
You know, these are tough times. It's certainly unusual times to be promoting a book. I'm a biology teacher and professor. And so we're just trying to adapt all of our classes to an online setting, which is a lot of work, but we're getting through. We're staying hunkered down, and, hopefully we'll get through this before too long.
Itching for some baseball. Itching for a little bit of the national pastime, but it's a good thing that you did this book prior to this year, because
true, right? I mean, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah,
you would have been stuck. But yeah, the book is called "The Wax Pack: On the Open Road in the Search of Baseball's Afterlife." The story of how it came together, I feel, is fascinating. And if you can, give us a little bit of a synopsis of what we have to look forward to in the book.
Yeah. So on the surface, the book is about this 11,341 mile road trip I took in 2015 to try to find all these players in this one pack of baseball cards that had never been opened, that had been sealed all these years. So I kind of like this analogy, like it's this little time capsule that had been forgotten, and then, it's excavated 30 years later, and it's my muse to set me off on this crazy road trip. So I head out and I hit the open road to find these guys. But I think what makes the book really special is that it goes beyond just baseball. Like, as I'm going along the way, a lot of these themes come up as I talk to these players about what it means to be famous, how you handle the end of your career when you have to retire at age 35 and you have the rest of your life in front of you. I was really impressed with how open a lot of these players were and sort of sharing some really personal things about things that they've dealt with in their lives and things that we can all relate to, divorce, strained relationships with family members, bankruptcy, disease. And it just made these players a lot more relatable than they are when they're just little pieces of cardboard when you're a little kid.
Yeah, exactly. And the year itself that you picked was 1986, which, in doing my research was that was the first year for you that you really picked up a pack of baseball cards. Ironically for me, my first pack was 1987, but I look back on 1986 because, obviously my connection here is to the Mets. You'll see blue on the hat, even though this is an Expos hat, it's a Gary Carter hat.
Oh, nice.
But 1986 for me is where it basically starts and stops with baseball. And, I know the set very well. And it's something that once you open that first wax pack and you see that black border and the lettering, the big block letters, it really, like you said, is unearthing a time capsule. So as you decided to go on this journey, as you decided to do this, what made you finally go and pull the trigger and grab that 1986 pack?
Well, actually, I had the idea for the book before I got the pack. I always wanted to find out what happened to the guys that I grew up collecting, and I had my favorite players who were actually not the stars. I mean, I liked the underdog guys, probably because I related to them. I always felt like an underdog myself because I was picked on in school, and so I think I just kind of felt this kinship to them. And I realized that the pack, getting an actual pack would be a great device to get a random sample of players, but also that just by probability, most of those players would be the very types of underdogs that I grew up idolizing.
Right.
And so I was able, you can get packs pretty easily because people back then, all the collectors saved them thinking they were going to be worth big money. And of course they're not, but they were mass produced. So, just for a few bucks, I was able to get packs on eBay, and then I said, okay, like, I'm gonna. I then after I opened it, I had to do about 9 months of research to prepare to contact the guys, to set up the itinerary. So it was a lot of prep work ahead of time.
Yeah, it was 1986 is starting to go up, the ranks in terms of the pricing. It was dead there
really?
for a little while,
Okay.
but 1986 is kind of getting a little more scarce than it was
Maybe my book will drive the market up.
It could, yeah, it really could, because 86, really everybody said that 88 on is the junk wax, and there's millions and millions and millions of cards. But now you look back, 87 and 86 are starting to get a little more scarce, and condition being one thing, obviously. That black border, you breathe wrong and there's a nick in it. But the players itself, I mean, you could have opened that pack and look, on top of it could have gone Don Mattingly, Roger Clemens, Ricky Henderson, Nolan Ryan, Eddie Murray. It could have been all the stars. But I love that you're focusing in on the guys, the lesser, maybe remembered guys, maybe even lesser known guys, because you could pull up a pack of cards from 1986 and you could have been a fan in 1986 and not even remembered some of the names of the ball players. So when you got to see who was in the pack, what was the first thought you wanted to do? Was it an order? Was it get knock one person off at a time, or kind of get that 9-month plan together and see who you get first and kind of hit the road?
Yeah, well, I had to figure out where they were in the country, right? So I had to kind of sit down with my atlas and look up their addresses and then map out, okay, where are they? And then, so really where they're located, I live in Oakland, California. I knew I wanted to do as big of a road trip as I could. So it was about sort of seeing where they were. There were some guys clustered in California, for example, and then seeing how I could map it out so the order would follow the geography. Although there were some times when I kind of went the opposite direction. Like I really wanted to go to the small town in Oklahoma where Don Carmen grew up. So I ended up going backwards for a little bit before I go back east.
The Don Carmen thing I love. I mean, because, that to me is that in itself is a story. So how did Don Carmen become your favorite player growing up?
Yeah, I had no idea why. I mean, he pitched for the Phillies, and the Phillies were my favorite team. So there was that. He also, he wasn't a star player.
I'm sorry to hear that, but continue.
That's right. Well, back in those days, though, the Mets just destroyed the Phillies.
They trounced the Phillies, but
with regularity. So I wasn't sure why he was my favorite. I'm still not exactly sure, but I'm a scientist, and so I'm not someone that is used to thinking about, well, everything happens for a reason or it was fate. But when if you read the book and you read the chapter about Don Carmen, and you see the sort of similarities between me and him in terms of our lives and our childhoods in many ways, I almost do feel like it was somehow meant to be that this guy would be my favorite, because it was uncanny how much I had in common with him.
What did you learn about his passion for his career and what he did? How much of his baseball life did he take with him into retirement?
Well, he says that even now, I mean, he's basically the therapist, the psychologist for some of the biggest names in baseball, because he works for Scott Boras, who represents Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg and all these guys. So when they go into a slump, like they all do, all the best players still deal with performance anxiety and all of that. Carmen gets on a plane and goes and meets with them and works with them. So he told me that in talking with the biggest stars in the game, he probably only talks about baseball 20% of the time, because what these guys need is not more refinement of their swing. They need a refinement of their brain, right? They need to kind of get things in perspective, because we all know what a mental game baseball is. And I truly think that's like, the next frontier of player development is the mental side.
Oh, yeah. And not to discredit anybody playing today. I mean, it just seems like the guys who played, back in the day, as they say, there was a mental toughness that had to come along with what they did, because it was a little bit more blue collar. I know the guys are still making good money in the 80s, but it was still a little bit more of the regular Joe style guy that, that once he hung up those cleats for the year, he was out in the woods hunting. He was out, doing other things that normally now they'd probably discourage you doing from,
not to mention
baseball
that
activities.
I mean, our society and our culture has changed a lot in 30 years. I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays there's much less of a stigma around psychology and talking about your feelings and being
Right.
vulnerable. In the players from the pack in their era, you didn't talk about, you didn't show any weakness. You didn't show or to show emotion, any kind of fear or anxiety, or to talk about it was perceived as a weakness.
Right. You were quirky.
So, yeah, you were kind of like alienated, like, oh, that,
Yeah.
you're a weirdo to talk about that. So the fact that these guys from that era were willing to open up to me, and I think is a credit to them having matured, but also to our society having become a lot more compassionate.
Yeah. And you talk about too, the age of some of the guys, and, they have the parallels to your life and being 35. And, look, that's where some careers go to die. But I'll tell you what, I was watching This Week in Baseball in one of the quarantine days over the last week here. And I said to myself, Jeff Reardon in this clip I was watching was 29 years old. But to me, he looked like he was in his 40s. He looked like he was this grizzled older guy, but he was 29. And I'm basically 10 years older than he was in that picture. And I'm saying to myself, man, like is there something about the way everybody aged? But at 35, people are done. People have to move on and find another career. What part of your discussions with the players you met with did you find to be the toughest for them to open up about? Was it that post-baseball life?
I think they were okay talking about it. I mean, I kind of set the tone in the interviews by saying I was much more interested in talking about life after baseball, and I didn't want to just revisit the same stories over and over again, because you find that these guys they have like pre-prepared answers.
Yes, it's their greatest hits.
Yeah, if you ask Lee Mazzilli about the '86 Mets team, he's going to go to like any of his sound bites, right?
Oh,
I mean, in fact,
we could do that all day long.
I don't know if you know the story of Don Carmen when he was a player. He actually was so tired of saying the same cliches that he posted a list of 37 answers on his locker and said, "Okay, go ahead and pick whichever one you want today."
That's great. No, I didn't know that.
Right. So they were actually. I mean, I think some of them. I mean, memory is a funny thing, right? I think a lot of times when I think there's an intersection between emotion and memory. So if there's a time in your life that was really dark or really depressing, it often clouds your memory. So while these guys were okay about talking about, when I asked the question about what they did right after they were done playing, a lot of them didn't have very vivid memories of that time, probably because it was so difficult, right?
Right.
But there was like a couple of things stand out. Like Steve Yeager told me that his last year was 1986, and he still wanted to play, but he was kind of also caught up in the whole collusion scandal that was happening then.
Right.
And he told me that when in 1987, he wasn't even able to watch opening day or watch any baseball because it hurt too much to see it. Right.
Yeah.
And he also that spring poured out all the alcohol in his house and never had another drop, which for Steve Yeager is huge because he was a party guy back in his career.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. It's amazing when they can open up about it. But then you got the guys who, okay, some might have had to move on and do other things. But then you got guys that just went right into coaching jobs or went into some sort of broadcast position.
Randy Reddy said, he didn't go right into that because he said he had to get the player out of him first.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And he said, when he retired, I love this quote. He said, "It was time for me to go home and learn everyone's name." That's just how it is. These players, the best guys, they can't possibly be very attentive fathers and husbands.
Now, how about a guy like Lee Mazzilli? We'll take the New York flavor into it. So 86 was a big year for him, period. So even though the picture on the baseball card was 1985, he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, I believe, in 85. In 86, his career changed, and he got another few years of life on it. It basically extended it. He went back to the Mets. They won the World Series. He became a huge role player for the next couple of years. And then ultimately, hangs around the organization and then ends up back with the Yankees, and then he's got a revitalized baseball life. So does he kind of use that benchmark year of 86? I know, like we said, it's cliche to just use that, Mets World Series soundbite, but does he use that pack of cards, 86, as like a year that changed his life again?
I don't think he didn't say that to me. I didn't explicitly ask him that. I think Mazzilli, he's always been he's a confident guy with good reason, but I think he learned a certain amount of humility the hard way because he
Yeah.
was such a prospect and he was an all-star with the Mets. And then he gets traded and he bounces around in Texas and the Yankees,
Yeah,
and he ends up in
Yankees.
Pittsburgh, and the manager just didn't like him. Chuck Tanner wouldn't play him, didn't really tell him why. And Mazzilli is not a big fan of Chuck Tanner either for obvious reasons. And so I think he was really, I do think he felt he was coming home and he was rejuvenated by the 86 Mets. But, when he retired, he did a bunch of things before he went back into managing where he was a commissioner for an independent baseball league. He went into the real estate business. He was did an off-Broadway play, and then I think there's
I remember that.
there's a quote about his wife was basically like, "You need to get out of here." Like she kind of pushed him out because it was so obvious that he was grasping for identity and he needed to go back to baseball because that's his identity.
So tracking down the guys in the pack, who was the most difficult?
Well, I never got to talk to Vince Coleman. I call him Vincent Van Gogh in that chapter. He's just kind of a difficult guy. He's known for not being very cooperative. The Astros PR guy told me when I met up with him that when Coleman was a coach for the Astros, whenever he would try to get Coleman to do an appearance, Coleman would say, "Is it paid?" And if the answer was no, it's like, "Nah, I don't want to do it." So Vince is about Vince. And so, but I still wrote about him. I went to Jacksonville, Florida. I found his childhood home and his high school and his church, and was able to kind of tell his story through seeing those places.
And then who would be the guy that shocked you, was the easiest to get a hold of in book?
Well, Rance Mullenix, the beginning of the book, because he works in real estate now, and we all know the easiest people's phone numbers to get are realtors. Yeah. They're just like, "Here's my number, call me."
Yeah. No, I know that. Yeah, I know that very well. That's a good point. But I guess where would you say the highlights were along the way? Was it something that a story that popped up out of nowhere, something you had to follow? Maybe something that you didn't expect to hear. What was one of those major highlights after the book was all completed?
I think when the guys would really open up and their willingness to be vulnerable and to share stuff about, especially about their childhoods, about strained relationships with kids, with parents. I mean, that humanized them, right? I feel like you finish the book and as a fan, you'll hopefully feel closer to these players because of the people that they are, and sort of kind of demystify some of that, larger than life quality that they have.
What was the best baseball story you heard along the way?
Baseball story. Well, yeah. I mean, some of the fun baseball stuff, unfortunately, didn't make it in the book because it just didn't feel like it fit with sort of the bigger narrative. I'm trying to think of I think there was a good story Rick Sutcliffe told about. He was promised, Tommy Lasorda promised him in 1981, the year they won the World Series, that he would give him a start before the end of the regular season, and he didn't follow through. And then he was left off the roster in the postseason. And Sutcliffe was so angry, he storms into Lasorda's office and clears out, just knocks over everything. And I think he said Tommy was kind of crazy. He kind of came at him, and Sutcliffe put him up against the wall. And he said he was ready to just smash all these Frank Sinatra pictures. And Dusty Baker came in and said, he said, "Kid, you're already in enough trouble. You don't want Frank mad at you too." And Sutcliffe kind of cooled down.
That's great. How did it change you as a fan?
It didn't diminish my fandom at all. It made me in some way feel more connected, but seeing these guys more as a peer. I mean, granted, I'll never play baseball. That they did something I could never do. But, that's gone. I mean, they're not playing anymore. The ability to play baseball at that level is very fleeting. And so just as a person, I felt much more connected to them. And it also made me realize when I go to a game now and I see the current players, when people like if someone makes an error or a mistake and people boo them, I think as fans, we sometimes can be a little callous and we think, oh, that guy's a millionaire. He's paid to do that. Like I have a right to boo him. And it's just made me a little more compassionate towards even the biggest star players, because you realize that, first of all, yeah, they're paid a lot of money, but guess what? If you were in their shoes, you would take the money too. So
Absolutely.
any fan that begrudges the open market of what they make is, not getting it. But also that these guys, the players, they act like they can't hear you. They pretend like they don't hear you, but they hear you, and it hurts. And it hurts their feelings. And, they carry that with them. So I would just say, like, just be as fans, like, just know that these are real people. I mean, they're, they have feelings and everything. And I think it's fun to boo a whole team, or to, someone like the Astros, they're villains. They deserve to be booed. But if someone makes a mistake, I mean, it's like, it's given me a newfound appreciation for them as these more well-rounded people.
Yeah, they might be the luckiest team for no baseball right now, because their fans were frothing at the mouth. Now we just want baseball. I think fans were just dying to get a hold of a couple of those Astros players during the games. Right. But what do you think some of these guys would have done in the social media era? Do you think they would have maybe adapted to it, or do you think that maybe psychologically some guys might not have really taken well to some of the criticisms that we have available now?
Well, I think it's really hard to say. I mean, I think that these guys are really glad they didn't have social media, because they had a lot of fun, the nightlife, the road life. You could do a lot more and get away with it, right? May not always be the best for the family situation, but I think they had probably a lot more fun. The players now, I imagine they're pretty. It's a lot less wild, I would guess. I'm sure they still have their fun, but it's not like back in those days, guys would go out, like 10, 12 guys would go out together to a restaurant or a bar and eat together and hang out together. And, they would get autograph seekers, but they didn't have to worry about someone putting their phone up and taking a video,
Yeah, there wouldn't be a 1986 Mets if there was social media. Right. I think they would have put the kibosh on that pretty quick. But all right, as we get into the wrap up here, we'll get into the big plugs. If I had one card from that 1986 set to trade you, who's one guy that you would have loved to have interviewed that you didn't pull out of that pack?
Now that's a really fun idea that I hadn't thought of. Was like, because I traded cards as a kid. Like, what if you did this and you started trading cards, right? And you kind of like, that'd be kind of neat. I would trade. I would probably want Marty Barrett, who was a Red Sox guy, not a star, just like the guys that I liked, and definitely a pain in the Mets side in the 86 World Series. But yeah,
although he did make the last out, struck out, he did end the game.
I remember that Jesse Orosco, right?
Yeah,
high fastball. Blows it by Marty Barrett.
Right by Marty Barrett. I mean, in the cabinet next to me, I got Ray Knight, Davey Johnson, Hojo, Carter, and Doc signed 86 cards. So
nice.
Maybe we could make some barter deals, and you could get another. Maybe the checklist. You could trade the checklist for a Marty Barrett. How about that?
You've probably read the books about Jeff Pearlman did a book on the 86
Oh yeah,
Mets,
absolutely.
And,
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's no, you can't write anymore about that team.
Right.
But hey, nonetheless, so if we can, let's wrap it up, and please, send the listeners of Diamond Conversations over to wherever they can get the book. I mean, it's pretty easy nowadays to find books from your retailers, but send them to the specific places they need to go.
Yeah, so if you go to waxpackbook.com, you can find ordering information. I always encourage people to order from their local bookstores. Especially now with this whole pandemic really hurting those small businesses. And then I'm on Twitter at WaxPackBook, and always happy to talk to people. And thank you for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, and before we let you go, with just the release, have you had a lot of interest in the book with people being home and looking for stuff to read?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of people have said, I have more time to read now. But of course, competing against that, you have people are losing their jobs. They may have less disposable income. So I tell people, even if you can't afford it, ask your library to order it, because that's another way to get the book.
And a lot of libraries are delivering right to the car now, so it's
Yeah.
it's almost perfect. So if you want to find out more about Diamond Conversations, you can head to Twitter. It's at Diamond Convo. Or if you want to follow me, it's at Chad EMB. But Brad, how about your social media? Let's throw it out there before we wrap it up, and let's get some followers reading this book, and maybe, like I said, trading a couple of cards down the road.
Yeah, so at Waxpack Book, I'm on Twitter. So just hit me up, and love to hear from you.